Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of this series that Matt and myself from Zaki Property we've been doing, just where we look at each of the states and we look at this process of data analysis, some of the warm spots, some of the hot spots in the different states. We're quite far into this series, pretty much one episode left after this one. Hopefully you've all enjoyed it so far. Before we jump into it, I just want to quickly highlight the recordings for all of the webinars can be found here on my YouTube page. So if you just go to if you just type Arshad Zaki or Zaki Property on YouTube, it'll come up Arshad Zaki dash Property Investing and Finance, and you'll find all three here: WA, Queensland, Vic, and you can just watch them. We'll be putting out other content as well while you're there. If you can leave us a follow to our YouTube page, we greatly appreciate it. Yeah, and then this one should be up soon as well. So that's that to just start off. Uh, Today we'll be focusing South Australia, Adelaide. I feel like, especially over the last 12 to 24 months, one of the forgotten markets was really big in like 2020, 2021, like northern suburbs Adelaide, southern suburbs Adelaide was really booming. And then obviously that kind of switched to Perth. So it kind of became a forgotten market, but it'll be interesting to talk about what areas still have potential now, what areas are going into its next growth cycle, so on and so forth. And I feel like with Adelaide, it's one of those things where it's low risk compared to like from a fundamentals perspective, you don't have those higher outgoings, cash flow in terms of like higher council rates, higher insurance costs that you get in places like Queensland, right? But let's quickly start off, Matt. Do you want to quickly say hi to everyone? I don't feel like you need to give the full intro. I'm pretty sure by now everyone knows who you are. If they don't, you can jump and watch the other videos. Matt, do you want to quickly say hi?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining again. Really appreciate your persistence in listening to Arshad and myself. Thank you for coming. As you know me pretty much, I'm chewing your ear off online every day. Apologies for that. Co-founder of HTAG. Been operating the last 6 years, and our mandate and focus is to help people, including ourselves, to make informed decisions when it comes to property investment.
Mm, exactly, exactly. Okay, beautiful. Thanks, Matt, for joining us again. Structure will be pretty much the same. I think for this session, we're actually going to skip out the fundamentals part. We're going to keep this one like a more sprint, shorter session. We're starting a little bit later in the day for those people in Melbourne and Sydney. Daylight savings as well. I kind of want to, get out. I feel like with daylight savings, you sleep later, so you get more time in the night to go out there and do stuff. So, the night's still young, Maddie. Like, I don't know about you, but after this,
What do
I'll,
you like? I know I was actually because the nightfall happens at 7:30 here at my end.
yeah.
And I wanted to go for a run. I'm like, I don't know, would it be like pushing it at 9:30 p.m.?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not.
Ah,
I'll see what I'll do. Maybe binge watch Netflix or something.
binge watch. There you go. See, as usual, we have an updated code for this one, part of the series, SA underscore data underscore insights. If you're not already signed up to HTAG, uh, just do it. I think it's as we've discussed already, and I'm sure if you're here by now, you realize the value of the software. But beyond the software, the community, the mentoring, absolutely amazing, absolutely phenomenal. I don't think there's much more I can say about it. Yeah, if you're not signed up already, go ahead, but I'm pretty sure everyone.
I appreciate it. Appreciate it, Asha. I just wanted to add, we now know exactly when we're going to have the next price increase. It will happen in the beginning of December.
Okay.
The intent behind is just to we've had an enormous volume of new subscribers in the last 6 months, but our aim is more focused on providing a tailor-made approach to our service and being
Mm,
able to do one-on-ones, provide feedback, etc.
mm,
So the value that we're bringing in the mastermind community definitely outweighs the fee. So it's a dual effect essentially. We just want to subsidize for the value that we provide, which is why increasing the pricing, but also I guess, limit the amount of entrants in a sense that only those who are willing to really deep dive can and who are willing to understand, I guess, the value that's being provided can be granted access. So yeah, prices increases in the next. I think it will be first week of December, most probably first or second or something like that.
Beautiful. Okay, cool. So as Matt mentioned, prices going up, which obviously makes sense given the amount of time and value they spend. It's not or provide. It's not just a software. It's the community around that. But I don't want to hop on that too much. So
Just regarding that, and we're going to see that in an analysis as well. Sorry to cut you off.
no, no, go.
We've recently introduced 24 new metrics just
Mm,
in the last release.
mm,
We're also working now on migrating from Telegram to a completely new community platform, which is going to have higher versatility and much more options there. And we are also building a very robust AI strategy piece attachment
mm.
that's going to go live in the next couple of months as well. So yeah, a lot is happening, and it will definitely help all of you guys, including myself, to really create that full narrative and story from strategy to acquisition.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay.
Okay.
So in terms of content for today, like mentioned, if you're interested in some of this fundamental stuff on how to think about your strategy and build a strategy for the area that you want to look at, we're not going to discuss that today. Just jump onto my YouTube page over here. And I think we go over it really in depth in the first webinar. So if you want to know the most about that one, go to the first webinar. We spend, I think, close to 45 minutes or an hour talking about the strategy of area selection and how to understand what fits the brief that your client has best in terms of strategy, and then from there how to translate that into the area that you're looking for, right? So nothing, I don't want to look into that today. Matt, anything you want to add here, or should we just jump straight
We
into?
should jump straight into it. What I wanted to do today is SA. South Australia is an interesting one because, as you say, the sun has partially sunsetted on sort of its. I mean, it's gone out of fashion, if you will, because there's been transitions and movements. There's still some good opportunities, but it is an interesting area where you don't have the same amount of flexibility when it comes to filtering and researching and trying to include and ascertain trends as you do in other areas, which I found very interesting when I was preparing for this live session. So we're not going to discuss the fundamentals, but what I wanted to do today is I wanted to highlight to individuals that sometimes when they're delineating a particular area or focusing on a particular state, you are sort of bound by what the database gives you. Sometimes you can't have your cake and eat it too. So, which is why it's always more important to cast a wider net. I do believe there are still some good opportunities. However, mainly in the mid-range and the high-range caps. In the lower range caps, sub 550K, it's slim pickings, which I
Yeah.
found very surprising.
Mm. Interesting. There you go. Okay. Yeah, and it's an interesting one, right? Like again, majority of the people dialed in today are like BAs, and probably like we'd always recommend to our clients to be open to any state, right? It just gives you more options. But at the end of the day, like a lot of the BAs would know that sometimes you just get those clients that are just not open to that, right? Like especially I found like older people, right? I get like a lot of older clients here in Melbourne who are just like even like 2 years ago, we're like showing them, look, in Perth, you can make this amount of money. If we go to Townsville, we can make, they're just like, it's a hard no. It has to be within drivable distance, right? It's like, it has to be within
Yeah,
drive.
yeah, I
And
feel you. Yeah, I feel you. I understand. By the way, when I say slim pickings, what I mean by that is if
yeah,
we're searching for an area, we have to consider the dual aspect of growth. So we have to consider the long-term performance and the potential of the area, but also the short to mid-term in a sense that, okay, when are we going to be in a position to extract some equity into additional purchases because
yeah,
that allows us to build our portfolio. So when I say
exactly.
slim pickings, I mean slim pickings in the sense that the fundamentals are not there for Adelaide to produce very good growth, like let's say Cairns or Townsville are producing now within the
Yeah.
short term.
It's already at
However,
the end of the growth cycle for most
yeah,
of them.
yeah. However, there are still, long term, there are still great opportunities, but we want to consider both because otherwise we can't build our portfolio.
Exactly, right. And that's where it's like if you get the client and you're able to convince them to go to other places, even better. And I think that's something that like since I've joined HTAG, I've actually gotten better at that process. Back in the day when I'd get a client and they'd be like, I only want to do Vic, I'd just be like, yeah, okay, whatever, let's just do it, right? And you'd argue against it a bit, provide a little bit of evidence, but at the end of the day, you just kind of follow the client. But these days, like I'm very hard. I show them all the data and I give them such a strong thesis that by the end of it, like the amount of them that are going to argue and say, oh no, but I still want to buy in VIC, that percentage is dropped by like 60, 70%, right? Because when you can show a much more thorough thesis, right? You can pretty much take them anywhere, right? You can be like, let's go buy on the moon if the thesis is good enough, right? You just need that thesis. But at the end of the day, you're still going to have some clients that are fixated on a specific area, and that's fine. You just got to show them what's best within that area. But
Can I add to that if you don't mind?
yes,
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with you. And I think having that thesis or a more robust developed due diligence report, if you want to call it, I think it's essential for educating the client. And I think what's really been put to the side, and it's sort of re-emerging in the market currently, you're sort of digressing a little, but it's important if buyer's agents are listening, because I'm in contact with hundreds of buyer's agents on monthly basis, so and I listen to the stories, and with most of them I've actually become friends, so I understand what is happening in their business and in the market. Educating the client has become a huge aspect of being a buyer's agent. It's no more, I need to be proficient in sourcing an asset. You also need to be proficient to explain to a client what's better for them. And usually when you get a client that's really fixated on investing in a particular area, the best way to go about it would be to say, okay, Mr. Client, this is a good area in the vicinity that you want to invest in. This is another area where I think you should invest in. And you compare and you put them in front of them and say, this is A, this is B. And I'll explain to you what these metrics are and what it suggests. No sane individual, unless they're overly emotional and just want to prove a point, will go against themselves and say, okay, I get it now. I will invest in an area that's going to bring me closer to my financial goals in a shorter period of time.
yeah,
And you do that best by superimposing and saying, no worries, Mr. Client, I will service you, but it's my responsibility as a buyer's agent to give you all of the information that I have. This is the area in Melbourne, for example. By the way, I like Melbourne, but anyway, let's continue with this is the area in Melbourne. This is the area in WA. I believe that WA is better, but you see for yourself. And what do you think now? And as I said, 9 out of 10 people will say, okay, I get it. Obviously,
yeah.
you're going to elaborate it further, but that's what it is. Give them that option that they want, and then superimpose them with that option that you believe is necessary.
Yeah. And I think like the percentage of people that will agree is very much dependent on the thoroughness of the evidence provided.
Absolutely.
Like, if you're just like, oh, look, it's a lot of people are buying there, it's a hot market, you know what I mean? Just give something, a very short, simple thesis, they'll be like, oh, I don't really know. I've heard the horror stories, whatever. But if you give like an articulate, clear, well-defined thesis, then majority of them should agree, right? Actually, just as Matt sets up, I'd love to know in the chat if people can share, or the BAs that are here today can share like what percentage of their clients go exactly where they want to go, and what percentage of them are fixated on an area.
I think
Matt,
that's a great question. That's a great question. Yeah.
I'm gonna stop screen sharing,
Yeah.
and if you can start screen sharing, and we'll jump into South Australia. Yeah, just would love for you to drop in the chat like what percentage of people go where you want to go. So for me, it's around, I'd say around 70% of my clients, they will go where I point them, go 70%, and then the other 30%.
I'm actually interested as well to see 90% go where I want them to go.
Beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful.
that's really
Great
good.
stuff, Sam.
That's really good actually. Yeah, see, and you must really explain well why is it better for them. It's funny, and I feel for buyers agents. I always said this. I really feel for buyers agents, those that are really genuine, because you have the kind that just wants to satisfy the client. They don't care. They want to close the deal, and they don't care how that's going to impact the future financial performance of a portfolio. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the genuine ones that really want to service the client properly. And you imagine you get a client that comes to you and says, buy for me here. And then I'm thinking, okay, why are you engaging someone and paying 15 grand, 20, 25, whatever the fee is, if you're going to dictate to them where they're going to buy? Like, to me, that's like, I just can't wrap my mind around it.
I think like some people they just want like they're in super hot markets. They've been trying to buy for a long time by themselves and failing, right? And now they're like, oh, if I use a BA, I can get help buying in Townsville. But might be actually a little bit late to buy in Townsville, right? Uh, But you get some of those people that they're just like, oh, I need to buy in Townsville. It's usually like a FOMO thing, right? And
Yeah.
that's just
I'm
how it is.
interested. I'm interested in Lorna's comment. I'm having a pushback from a client now, right now. I know we're digressing, Arshad, but this is interesting. Uh, why are you having pushback? Where are you suggesting to them? Let's just do this quickly and we'll deep dive into the platform. But I'm just interested what you're suggesting to them and why they're pushing back.
Yeah, would love for the others to share as well. For those dialing in today that aren't buyers agents, sorry for the little bit of a tangent. I'm pretty sure most of the
Yeah.
people here today are, but for those who aren't, maybe this is good insight for you that you should trust your buyer's agent if you when soliciting.
Look at the response.
Yeah.
They chat to too many people, listen to all the podcasts. I know, I feel you. Yeah, that's the problem. But anyway, as Arshad has said, I mean, when we provide a very articulate answer, and when you, I mean, I'm going to use the word bombard them. It's a negative. There's a negative connotation attached to that. But essentially, when you bombard them with a coherent and cohesive information or a structure and narrative, they just go, oh, okay, I'll shut up now. All right, going back to SA. So I'll start with the lower price picks. What I found, and I'm going to do it a bit different. Before we just deep dive into the areas, we looked at the list that I provided and we just sort of picked a few. But this time, as most of you who know me and how we do things at HTAG, you need to construct a coherent narrative with the metrics. So first we address the meta narratives, and this is the fundamentals that Arshad was speaking about, which we're not going to go into detail about explaining today. But you first address the confidence because you want high certainty and accuracy in data and eliminate any fluctuations in data through different intervals, especially if your investment horizon is long term. You need a stability in a data set to make an accurate decision that's going to apply long term. You also need to buy an insurance policy and eliminate any centralized industries, potential for flooding, bushfires, and dominance of mining and agriculture, which is sort of addressed in the risk score. And then what I usually do, the second or the third part of this meta narrative, or if you want to call it this fundamental aspect of research and filtering, is I consider affordability. And I just want to show something to people. I do. Can you see my screen, Ashad? We said wages are behind.
Yes, I can see a screen.
Yeah. So I do reports for clients anyway. In reports, I do narratives and explain things. And usually when I talk about affordability, I show this graph here. So what we see here, and this is why affordability is part of this meta narrative that needs to be satisfied. I show that disparity between wages and residential property prices is biggest since 2004. Okay. So affordability is one of these, meta metrics, if you will, that's going to play a crucial role in potentially, indefinitely into the future, because, our purchasing power has been eroded simply because of increasing interest rates and I guess debasement of currency, essentially. So this is why this gap is widening. And because this gap is widening, we have to consider affordability as one of the most important aspects in the filtering, because for when an area is affordable for its residents, and this is how we know that a warm spot is going to turn into a hotspot. When people ask me, how do you know that a warm spot will become a hotspot? Well, I know because I've seen it work in real life every time, but I also know that it will do so in the future, because we are first making sure that we delineate affordable areas for residents of that suburb, which sort of is a great and important foundation for that owner-occupied demand to start trickling in. And if you have a situation where supply is completely reduced or nosediving, i.e., you can interpolate a direction therefrom, into the future, and supply will be reducing into the future, and have very affordable areas. Even if your demand is flat and is not reducing, small increases in demand from owner-occupier activity because the area is affordable lead to price growth, which then causes a positive feedback loop. So affordability is very important. But then when I actually filtered for affordability, by the way, what is also interesting is that I've just introduced three filters. Well, the first one is the price, second one is confidence, and then the third one is the RCS, risk score, and we only have three suburbs. We only have three suburbs, which means that the rest of the suburbs in SA under this price point don't meet these two criteria, which I find very interesting. So moving on, if you, let me just do a refresh because I was filtering. I just want to make sure that I haven't pressed a certain filter, which is reducing the amount of potential suburbs by accident. So what we do, we'll go, let's delineate Greater Adelaide and then go rest of SA. So we're just looking at those. Let's now set the price filter. Let's set it at 550. So is this 5 million? Yeah. Yeah. So it's set at 550. Again, let's do the confidence bit. Confidence equals high. Now let's do the risk, which we've done before, but let's set it now again. Lower risk score greater than equal to 50. So we're eliminating all of the areas that have above average inherent risk. See, we come to 3 already. I find this fascinating. I mean, every state that you do, you at least have 50. So that's what I find very interesting. So what this tells me is that in the lower price point, there's only 3 suburbs that have below average inherent risk. Okay. Then when I move on to affordability as a meta narrative that needs to be addressed, affordability index for this price point, I would set it at less than 35. But in all honesty, my preference in choosing, and Arshad, we go through the second step. This is the first step, which is the filtering process. The second step is the comparison, where we assign significance and weighting to metrics and we rank suburbs. I would prefer, when I choose an area for this price point, I would prefer for its affordability index to be anywhere between 25 and 30. I would set it at 35 when I'm filtering, just to cast a wider net and not to eliminate a potential screamer in supply and demand. But I would want to choose it, between 25 and 30. If I set it at 30, I don't get any suburbs. So I have to increase it to 35 to actually produce something, which to me tells me that in comparison to other states, SA is very peculiar and particular because for this price point, or the lower end price point, it actually is higher at the unaffordability spectrum than other areas, which is something to consider. Now, the it's Clare is 31 years to own, 31.6. Mount Gambier is 32.36. Port Lincoln is 32.34. Now, affordability is a very important metric, both short-term and long-term, because it's an indication of steam. We can ask ourselves, how much steam does this area have? Which is why I said we have 3 areas here, and I've just inserted 4 filters. And I would say, and I would argue, that they don't have much steam in short to mid-term to come. But let's see, if we expand it, let's see which area is the best one, and I'll do that quickly, just for our listeners, so they can take away something under this price point. Mount Gambier, usually what I would do first is I will go to the short and mid-term metrics, just to establish, when our client can actually extract equity into the additional purchases. And this is where I refer. We can see that the affordability index is above the 30-year threshold. Ideally should be below 30 for this price point, and ideally at 25. In this instance, we see that stock on market is reducing, while days on market overall trend is also reducing, which means that demand is increasing. However, what is particular about this is that we see that the recent trend in days on market is actually increasing. Okay. So the steam of demand is actually dropping off. So we can see that the recent trend, which is sitting at 38 days, is higher than the trend than what was happening before. So that this is telling me that combined, and this is how you construct in narratives, combined with higher unaffordability and the fact that the demand is dropping off, we can see that this market is losing steam. We can see that inventory is actually flat. It's not reducing in stock on market. Building approvals are sort of up there. Let me see what the overall numbers are. 36 approvals, only 29%, 0.29. Hold periods are sitting at a high. So that's all okay. Vacancy rates are increasing, so that can also signal oversaturation from investors. Overall, on face value, this market is not too bad, but my concern is that it's losing steam, and that within the short to midterm, it probably is not going to return as much as we would want to build substantial equity to leverage into additional purchases. However, if we are only bound by Adelaide, we have to pick, the best of two evils, essentially, if you will. I don't know what that saying is. It just escaped me now. But let's see the other two. I believe that Mount Gambier should be the best from memory, but let me just see short to midterm metrics for the other ones. So this one is also over 30-year threshold. Now look at this one, Arshad. Again, same scenario, which is telling me, giving me pattern. It's actually giving me pattern for SA. We see a reduction in SOM, an overall trend. Okay, we see a reduction. However, and we see a reduction in the overall trend in days on market. However, recent days on market has been increasing dramatically. And currently, the 3-month rolling average is sitting at 82 days. So this is a perfect example of behavior of when a market is losing steam and going through another cycle. It's actually cooling off from its top. And remember how I said it takes a long time for a trend in metrics to actually shift. You can't shift a reducing trend in days on market simply by having 1 month high days on market. You need constant height, or you need constant months to have a higher days on market for this trend to start tilting towards flat and increasing. And this is the onset. Couple of months in a row, we're seeing high days on market. And if this continues, we're going to see the trend flattening more and more and demand evaporating, and then price growth diminishing and potentially going into negative growth. With this one as well, what we see is much more oversaturation potentially from investors, because the vacancy rates overall trend as well as recent are increasing dramatically. So if you're an investor, you wouldn't buy in this area, even though supply and demand overall trends are reducing, but the recent trends in supply are concerned, as well as the recent trend in demand are concerned. And even if you buy, you might struggle to actually rent out your home and get the required rent that you need in order to service your loan. So these are the tell signs, as I say, that potentially we should stay away from this market. Now, is this market bad long term? No, we have to look at other metrics superimposed to look at the stability factors. And we can't get into that now. But short to midterm, this is something to stay away from. And if you guys want to take a snapshot, this is a perfect example of a market that's losing steam. Let's look at the last one, Claire. Now, this is fairly regional. I don't have anything against regionality, by the way, to put a caveat there, but I just want to see its supply and demand. Okay, its affordability, again, index is above 30. What we see in this instance is the same thing. We see the same scenario play out. By the way, this area is close to being medium confidence. We can see that there's no days on market recorded in some of the months, which means that the volume of sale is a little bit lower. It's still high confidence, but I have a feeling that in the months and years to come, it actually can turn to medium. That's another issue. But overall, we see the same pattern. We see a reducing stock on market, then a recent trend that's increasing. And then over here, some of the months are not recorded, but we see a pump in days on market to 170 days. That's astronomical. Even though the trend is reducing, we see either a non-recording of the days on market, which equals low volume of sales, which is always detrimental for price, or we see a substantial pump to 170 days. So again, if I had to choose, I would choose Mount Gambier out of the three. First, I don't have a lot to choose from, but I would choose Mount Gambier. And by the way, guys, I know people that have invested in this area. I'm not saying Mount Gambier, for example, is a great area. Mount Gambier was a great area, and those who went into Mount Gambier have actually made decent returns. Let's look at the different growth patterns across timeframes. So, for example, in the last year, it has had 12%, which is indicative of a hotspot. In the last 3 years, it has returned 50%. In the last 5 years, it has returned 80%. So this coincides with what Arshad was saying, in the sense that, Adelaide was a hotspot and it was returning phenomenally. And then people shifted to Perth. And we can see that from the higher affordability indexes, or rising unaffordability, that this area was pumping and now it's coming off its peak. Now, everything moves in cycle. This area shouldn't be binned, but this is why time in the market is not only sufficient, we should also time the market, in the sense that it should be put aside for now, But in the next 5 or 6 years, for example, when the cycle shifts back to SA, and when the unaffordability rise actually starts cooling off a little, it can become more appealing, and then you can potentially consider it.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And one of the things is just like it's just part of the cycle, right? Like I was looking at the data for what's this suburb, Baldivis in WA recently, right? And obviously that was like a super hot spot like 3, 4 years ago. If you bought there, you would have made like crazy money. But I was just looking at over like the last 5 to 6 months, the vacancy rate has gone up from around 1% to 3.5%, right?
Oof.
3.5% vacancy rate, right? And because one of the clients, or like one of the potential clients, was asking me about, oh, should I buy in Baldivis? I have some family friends that bought there. What do you think? So I just jumped on it, and just so it shows that like things go in cycles. Like it's not that this is a bad area to invest in. It's just like, is it a bad area now? When will it be a good area in the future, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
and you, sorry, I cut you off. So
No, no, maybe finish your point because I did have one question over here because I noticed one thing while you were doing the filtering, but
tell
maybe
me.
finish your point first and then I'll ask that question.
Yeah, so just to say, we have a tendency as human beings to just, it's like doom and gloom kind of thing, like as soon as somebody says something about an area, you're assuming that it's an all-encompassing no.
Mm.
And this is the same thing about when I was speaking about WA, and I had this webinar or masterclass the other day about WA and which hotspots not to enter. And I had a couple of examples in WA. And what I wanted to make clear is that I'm not bagging those areas and I'm not bagging WA. People who have invested in those areas 3 years ago have made a killing. But what I was cautioning people to do is to enter them now. So it all depends when you enter, which part of the cycle. Everything moves in cycles, and it is your responsibility and job as a buyer's agent to know where demand will move so you can make more money for your clients. That's all it is. And the next aspect you need to know is, okay, does the area have the right fundamentals to be stable for the entire duration of the client holding that in their portfolio? Because you don't want to pump and a dump. So those are the two things that we are responsible for. So, something goes out of fashion, but it comes back in. You know what I mean? It's the same with fashion, essentially. So it's not bagging an area. It's not saying stay away from it, never touch it. It's disgusting. And usually people who do that, it's essentially clickbait. Nothing more and nothing less. It's clickbait. But yeah, anyway, let me know about the filters.
Yeah, so before you added it, when you just, so if you can remove like lower risk and affordability, if you can just remove those two filters. And again, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. So there were quite a few other places over here, and I guess like these suburbs. So the three suburbs that after you put in the filters, apart from Mount Gambier, they're not really well-known suburbs. But like these suburbs, they're pretty well known, like Elizabeth Downs, Elizabeth East. It's like they're part of actual main city Adelaide, right? Northern suburbs. I'm not saying they're good areas to invest in right now. They've gone through like crazy growth over the last 18 months. But when you add that risk filter and it filters them out, what exactly makes these areas non-low risk or makes them higher risk? What is
So our risk score that's a good question. Our risk score takes into account 80 metrics. And now the primary aspect of the risk score are these four. By the way, we've now separated them in the table. So you got economic diversification index, you got mining and agriculture dominance, flood and bushfire, indexes. Now, the risk score further takes into account long-term aspects such as socioeconomics, renter-to-owner ratios, hold periods, etc. But the primary weighting, if you will, in the score is awarded to these four domains. So you sometimes have, for example, so you look at this one, Elizabeth Downs. Its industry centralized diversification is, let me just open it up, and I just want to show the definition. This is very important to understand because, I had the masterclass the other day and I was talking about South Glaston, and one of the gentlemen, rightly so, pointed out that do we get a combined score based on one of the gentlemen pointed out that South Gladstone is not completely dependent on mining. However, the index for example, is economic diversity. So maybe it's not dependent on mining, but what could happen is that you have maybe 3 or 4 industries, so it's not diversified enough. And not only that, those 3 or 4 industries are of lower socioeconomic earning standard, which exposes the area to a higher risk should macroeconomic conditions change from good to bad. For example, economy shifts. So if our industry diversification index, for example, and I'm going to read it out now. It says the economic diversity index is derived by employing a modified version on Shannon-Weiner index algorithm to analyze employment data. This methodology quantifies the diversity of employment sectors within a region. Moreover, occupational categories commonly associated with elevated socioeconomic standards receive increased weightings. So it's not only the number of industries that are present, but also the socioeconomic standings attached to those industries that are present. So if you sometimes have a lower score, it's not a lower score because there's only one industry in that area. This is much more nuanced. It's a lower score because there's not enough diversification, and not only that, diversification, even not only that, the industries that are there are associated with lower economic standings, which means that they're more volatile and exposed to changes. Think about it this way. Regretfully enough, we live in a society where that's segregated or hierarchical. So households of lower socioeconomic standings are much more sensitive to economic downturns on average than households with higher socioeconomic statuses and standings. Yeah. So this is why the index might potentially exclude those areas. And then for areas that don't have this index, they might have other things, such as, for example, very high renter to owner ratios or low hold periods. It's essentially an algorithm that crunches data. It comes to a particular conclusion. But the thing is, though, this is why I set the wider net at 50. I don't go very high and I set it at 80 and 90. I do set it at 50. So out of these, for example, some of these suburbs, so we've got 19 entries now. What we see is that most of them have very low diversification, or their diversification that is present there, which is low, is associated with lower socioeconomic standings. Yeah. Others, for example, have dominance of mining and agriculture. For example, Roxby Downs. You can see this. This is why we separated the two. It doesn't mean if the industry is not diversified that it's implied that it's mining. We've actually separated the two into 2 different metrics.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, because when I was just looking at the list, pretty much all of these are like hyper regional areas, except those 3 over there: Elizabeth Downs, Elizabeth East, Elizabeth.
Look at this, Arshad.
Yeah,
Also, the
but they're all like, yeah,
the socioeconomics are extremely low, like 1 out of 10. Yeah.
yeah. It's a very poor area, like that whole city of Playford. It is
So
your
this is why the risk, we initially we had only the risk score, and then we realized that we also need to piecemeal it and separate a few of those metrics out for people to be able to understand and see and make a decision from different angles. So that's why we've separated, well, you have arshad as a separate thing anyway. Also, risk takes into account data confidence. While in this instance it's high, but you have, data confidence, socioeconomics, you have industry diversification, mining, agriculture, dominance, flooding, bushfires. You have all of these multiple things,
yeah. I'm not arguing the point. It's just
No, I get it. I know it's an important question though.
no,
Because
yeah.
go.
To me, the interesting point is that, like, I feel like I know South Australia quite well because I was doing some buying there like way back a couple of years ago, right? Maybe almost like 3 years ago. And if you just gave me this list of suburbs and didn't give me any data, I'd probably lean towards some of those suburbs that weren't qualified. So it kind of shows you that the data doesn't always align with the intuition, right? But that's why it's important to go through that data process, because sometimes these assumptions of just like areas and what you know about them and the way people talk about them, they can get in the way of the data. So it's just interesting.
So let me just, and that's great segue. I really love what you just said. So now, again, remember how just a moment ago we were saying that, when we're talking about Elizabeth Downs, for example, it doesn't mean that it was always a bad area. Because if I go back we can see that in Elizabeth Downs, it has made 187% return in a decade. So whoever invested in this area would have made a mozza, if you will, you know? So they would have made a lot of money. Now, the question is this area a good investment location moving forward? And then I have to superimpose a couple of elements. First, its typical value is 512, but look at its affordability index.
I can imagine it'd be extremely low.
It's 44 years to own.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's 44 years to own. By the way, 45 years to own is an affordability index I set for $1.2 million typical value areas. This is 2.5 less than that. Yeah. So not only that, its socioeconomics are highly disadvantageous. So imagine an area, just think about a scenario. Imagine an area that has completely reached its friction point with affordability. So its internal residents are coughing up blood to maintain or even buy a property, and yet the socioeconomic standings are really low. So then the question is, okay, how much steam does this area really have? And now you can produce, you can abstract certain elements upon which you're going to make a decision and ignore these. I will not ignore these. I will not ignore this and advise everyone not to ignore it, because if you have an area that is extremely unaffordable for its residents, has seen a lot of growth in a decade, and yet it is on the lowest of the lows of the socioeconomic standard, it is a sign for concern.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Beautiful. Shall we, anybody have any questions on these, or shall we jump into the next tier of price point? Cool. All right, Matt, do you want to jump to like some of the mid-tier?
Let's do it. So what I'll do, I'll change the price point here. I'll just do it from here because it's more interesting. It feels like I'm playing video games. So we go to 800, let's say. Is this 800 or 80? 800. All right, confidence. Then we will go into risk. Let's eliminate that risk. See, again, I always say risk is an insurance policy, you know. As I always say, like, I don't plan to, you know, have a car accident every time I drive out of the driveway, but I still pay for the insurance. So, you know, you as a buyer's agent, you need to sleep at night and ensure that, you know, the area that you're putting your client in has the right supply and demand dynamics, but also has higher potential for stability. If your investment time horizons are short-term to mid-term, let's say 1 to 4 years, then you can compromise on certain aspects of industry centralization and risk. Now, you're never going to know when the macroeconomic conditions are going to change to affect the centralized or lack of decentralized industries, but still shortening your time horizon, you can relax the risk a little. But most of us are in it for compounding, you know what I mean? As well as having this potential to actually realize gains in the short term so we can leverage into additional purchases. Now, going to affordability now, because we are at the 550 to 800 range, I will set the index at less than 40. My preference would be to find something around between 35 and 30. See, we got 12 areas. What is interesting to me again is that I'm inserting only 3 filters, including the price. Let's say price is the 4th, and yet I'm getting only 12 results. Usually I will get to 12, for example, in Queensland, when I've also gone down and actually restricted the supply. So let's now restrict the supply. I don't know if you guys know, but as I said, we have in the last month introduced 25 new metrics, and we're very proud of the fact that we've introduced trend metrics because they're very important and much more precise and streamline your research at this page in a better way. So what I'll do, instead of setting SOM percentage, which will be the current value stock on market, I'll go with long-term trend. I'll make sure that it's nosediving. So I'll set it less than 0. Less than 0 means an incline that's going down. I'll do the same. Then I'll do the same narrative. I'll delineate a warm spot first. So I'll restrict the supply. Let's go to inventory, less than 0. Now let's restrict future. See, we already have how many? We reduce it from 12 to 10. Let's now reduce the building approvals because we want to restrict the future supply of new dwellings coming to the market if we want to potentially extract equity in the next 2 years. So I'll set it at less than 1.5%. And then hold periods here, it's reduced to 9 now. And then look at the hold periods. Let's address the livability aspect of the area. and set it at about 1 cycle greater than equal to 7. Okay, these are the areas that we're working with. Okay, I'm not going to go further into layering any filters because I've already have a list of 8 suburbs that I can do a detailed comparison on. You know, what I usually do is I cut across and I see what is standing out, what is red completely, that is of concern. Now, for this price point between 550 and 800, we see, for example, an arshad of 2. It is, if you're buying between 550 and 800, and if you're edging closer towards the 800 mark, arshad or socioeconomics become an imperative in a sense that it is very rare to see a suburb reach a $1.3 million mark with an arshad of one or 2. Now, arshad and socioeconomics do not play a role in the price points that are lower than 550, and we see a lot of areas such as Elizabeth Downs experience doubling effects in a decade or even more with a very low socioeconomics. And so that's fine. So I will never filter in arshad there. But for this price point, 800K, arshad is a must because we want this 800K to get to 1.2, 1.3. You know, otherwise we're not building a portfolio. We're just, you know, wasting time. So where is it? Where's the arshad? So arshad, if you set it at greater than equal to 3, the Craigmore comes off the list. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. If you cut across, let me just see if we cut across, let's see if anything else. And we can see that these suburbs, you know, they're edging mainly towards the 40 years to own mark. Most of the supply trends are green, demand trends. So let's look at the vacancy rate as well. See if we address the vacancy rate trend. And by the way, remember how I said the vacancy rate trend eliminates the oversaturation of investors if it's completely increasing. So what we'll do, we'll address the vacancy rate trend just to see if, let's say long-term trend less than 0. Let's see what we get. I'll be interested. We get only 2, you know. And if we expand these suburbs, let's see which one is better. What was the second one? Arshad, what was the second one? I clicked on the wrong button accidentally.
No. I think it was Banks here. Sorry, Downs, and sorry, I missed it as well.
I'll tell you now. Let's look at our correspondence.
I can check and see it.
Banksia Park, yeah?
Yeah, Banksia Park, that was the one.
So if we look at all right, so let's look at Banksia Park and what are the 2 that we narrowed down to? Not this one.
Sorry, Downs.
Yep. So let me just close all of these babies because they're interrupting us. Yeah. All right, so we got Surrey Downs. Okay, let me just see where it's located. It's interesting. So it is sort of, you know, greater capital city region. It has grown 120% in a decade. It has seen a lot of growth in the last 7 years. Woof, look at that. 93% in 5, 44. It's been pumping. It's been pumping, you know. And now we should expect minimal growth, you know, in the last in the years to come. Let's look at its supply and demand dynamics. What do we see? We see a reducing stock on market. We see a reducing inventory, so the supply is becoming tighter, reduced building approvals. Hold periods have taken a nosedive from 10 trend to 8, which is, okay, we're still within 1 cycle, but we can see a bit of a change in sentiment about the area, which is interesting for some reason. I'm not sure why. Rent to owner ratio is low. Let's look at the demand. Now, we can see that the days on market is not recorded in some instances, maybe because there was nothing to sell, which produced a pump, or maybe because the lot volume is low, so it's still debatable. But it's sitting at 37 days. However, recent days on market is increasing, we can see. It's above the trend line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4 are below. So it's above the trend line. It sort of matches the previous narrative that we discussed for the lower price point, but not completely. I'm interested about the vacancy rate. See, it's sort of reducing minorly overall trend, although recent trend is increasing. Now let's look at the other one just to see which one is better. What is interesting is that they're close, yeah, to
They're
each
both
other.
in that
Huh?
city of Tea Tree Gully, like Eastern Adelaide.
Yeah, so Surrey Downs and Banksia Park,
Mm.
they're close to each other. I don't know Adelaide that well, but so similar sort of pattern in growth, although I think Surrey Downs has had more. This one has a higher arshad, which is good to see. It has a lower renter to owner ratio. I'm interested about its supply and demand. Look at this. What is interesting that its overall trend is flat. Recent trend has been pumping, but it's still sitting at 34 days, 3-month rolling average, which is very good. Stock on market is reducing. Inventory is also reducing. Building approvals are reducing, and hold periods are sitting at a bit of a lower than Surrey Downs. But I would say that the rest of supply and demand are better for this suburb. So I would pick this one if I was looking at the short to mid-term performance, because you can still see that the days on market are in green, sitting at 34, which is pretty reasonable. So if I had to choose, out of these two evils, I would definitely choose this one as the top choice.
Interesting. So I actually had a question over here and it kind of relates to this area well. So these like this whole block of Adelaide, there's the type of houses that are being sold are not really uniform, right? So let's say if we pick a suburb like let's say Bocasia and Mackay, for example, right? Majority of the houses are really similar, right? They're like there's some level of uniformity around the year of build, the land size, some 3x1, some 4x2s. But in these suburbs, you'll get like some houses that are like 1,500 square meters, 5x3. Then you'll get a lot of smaller houses that are like 400 square meters, newer build, so on and so forth, right? And like, so how do we interpret the data if to see if it's like what type of asset would make sense in this area? Or if like if one asset is better and then the other asset is a problem.
Well, first I will go first. By the way, the data is aggregated at a suburb level.
Yeah.
And it's aggregated at the suburb level because at the suburb level you have sufficient sufficient number of data points to extrapolate patterns in metrics and to extrapolate metrics from them. When you have, and this is why there's still a need for buyers agents, because if you had a platform which can tell you to discern between two different asset types and which is better, you completely eliminate the buyer's agents out of the picture. So the best thing to do would be to look at the demand profile. So here you can see that 3-bedroom houses are mostly in demand. So I would go for that. Now, the question of, do I go for 1,000 square meter block or do I go for 300? Well, this is something that a buyer's agent would know better than me. And potentially you can consider aspects such as the yield, additions of granny flats, on how you can actually use the property, etc., etc. But it is hard. What I'm trying to get at, it is hard to develop a meaningful pool of data points for very, very granular elements of a suburb, and then have sufficient volume to extrapolate pattern upon which you're going to make a decision. And I hope, and I think buyers agents should pray that that never happens.
Yeah.
So, and it will never happen. It will never happen. I'm being facetious. I'm sort of being a bit smart, but something like that will never happen because there's too many nuances at the purchasing level, which is why buyers agents that can discern one asset from another and which one is better for the client actually flourish. But at the suburb level, I think your question was more like, how would you know that this is the appropriate typical value? Because the houses are so different, then how can I apply this typical value to different homes? Now in a suburb, usually at a suburb level, at a level where data can be aggregated sufficiently, you have substantial volumes to iron out these nuances, these differences. Because yes, the houses are different, but the suburb is large enough and the volume is high enough that these differences are sort of ironed out into an aggregated metric or a score. This suburb has high data confidence, which means that the volume is sufficient. So is it representative of every household? Well, I would say it is a typical value. So it is a typical value. It's not a medium. It is a typical value. And guys, what a typical value is, and I think this is important segue, just to show to people. If I can find that article, I haven't looked at it in a while. Where is it? I want to find it. So, Wade, it's important. I just want to show you a scatter plot of what a typical value. Two best measures determine for people. Here it is. Core metrics. See, so I just want to show you when it comes to pricing of real estate, and I might infer. So this is mediums. This is how different data providers actually ascertain median pricing. So you can see the scatter plot, and what they do is they look for a median between all of the data points. And because mediums oscillate dramatically, it would even be more difficult to determine whether a median price for a property in a suburb that has completely different asset types is actually accurate. It will be even more difficult to determine whether it's accurate. When it comes to the typical price, it is much more of a straight line. So it's a more direct representation of what is really happening on the ground. But when it comes to asset selection, this is where buyers agents come in and determine which one would be the most in demand. What we can provide you with is with the demand profile and tell you, listen, guys, in this area, 3-bedroom homes are mostly in demand. And then you go off and then you piecemeal and see, okay, which bedroom home do you think is better for your client and which one will grow more, which one will provide more value? I don't know if I've answered the question. Maybe I misunderstood it.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, answers the question pretty well. Cool. I think the long story short is about it. No.
Exactly. Because if you had something that can tell you, but think about it this way, if you had something that can tell you specifically, by click of a button whether house A is better than house B, buyer's agents don't exist anymore. Now go further, that means that in prediction and data analysis, or in data in general, you need volume to extrapolate pattern, and you need pattern in order to make a decision. But for example, you as a buyer's agent, because you've purchased and bought homes, you get a feel for a particular home and a particular house, because you bought in many different areas, which becomes hard to actually put into a coherent data set. It's all in here for you. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. Let's look at the last set of areas, and then I reckon we can tie it off a bit early today.
Alrighty. So now I have to start the filtering again because I've actually deleted it. I'll be fast. Bear with me, guys. So 800. So greater than 800, 1, 2, 3. I'll be quick. As you can see, we have a safe filter and safe strategy feature here. I never do it because I force myself to always construct a narrative that I'll understand, that I can feed back to the client. So is this 800 greater than? I think we had, to avoid filtering, so the last bit was this. So you had Flagstaff Hill, Golden Grove, Greenwith, Shadow Park, Win Whale. Which one would you, out of your experience, give the best score to? Which one would you pick, Arshad?
I know Shadow Park is a pretty good area, so maybe we can have a look at that one. And then the other one we could have a look at would be, let me just pull that up again.
Yeah, pull it up at your end because I will have to just
Yeah.
include it here.
Yeah, let's have a look at Shadow Park and Golden Grove.
Shadow Park. Which one would you put your money on?
Let's go Golden Grove. Let's have a look at that one.
No, but I'll look at both. But tell me which one.
Oh, which one would I put my money on?
Yeah. How do you spell shadow? Is it as in
SHEIDO.
H S H E?
Yeah, there you go. Shadow. It's like Shadow, not Shadow.
Oh yeah, Shadow Park.
Golden
And
Grove.
then the other one is
Golden Grove. I think I'd probably put my money on that one if I had to, but I could be
on
wrong.
Golden Grove. Yeah.
Let's go. Let's see how good my intuition is.
Let's
Could go.
do it. It's all about that. It's all about dismantling our intuition. All right. So where is it? Where it
So
needs to be?
I picked one in the south, one in the north. Shadow's like down in like city of Morford Vale. Sorry, city of Onkaparinga. It's like down
Let's
south.
see its growth patterns. Pumping. It was
It's a very
interestingly
nice area.
blend zero. Okay, so its URSAT is 7, 12 renter to owner ratio. Affordability is sitting at 40. Now, what's its typical value? 879. What is interesting? So, see, this is a great example. Imagine what we said, Elizabeth Downs.
Yeah.
Its affordability index was at 44, and yet its price point was 550, yeah, or 512. This one has a price point at 879, and it has a lower index.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at days on market, still at 22 days, although we had recently at 40, but overall, both long-term trend and recent trend is reducing, okay? Which is, see how as you're going higher up in the price point in South Australia, you're getting better options. That's very interesting. So not only do you have cycles across states, you have also cycles within the same state across different price points, if you want to call it a cycle. Because you can still see that preference remains here, which means that a 3-month rolling average for the days on market is still sitting at 22 days, while stock on market, a long-term trend as well as recent trend is reducing and taking a pretty decent nosedive. Same for inventory. Building approvals are increasing, but they're so sporadic that this metric becomes meaningless. And we see 3 approvals only currently. So I'm not even going to look at that. Look at this. Look at these whole periods. Not only is there minimal change in sentiment, not only is the trend pumping upwards dramatically, but it's actually currently sitting above trend at 12 years. This is very rare because overall in Australia, an average would be about 10. So I love what I see. Days on market is reducing overall long-term and short-term. What do we have from vacancy rates? It's slightly increasing recent trend, nothing meaningful here. I mean, I would prefer to see an overall trend going down, but okay, you can't have a perfect alignment of metrics. Clearance rates, nothing. Overall, I really like this one. I'm a fan, I must say. Considering, by the way, I'm a fan considering what we were looking at already in SA. So we can see that this has much better metrics. And look at the RCS score. They're pretty high as well. So let's look at Golden Grove. This is the one that you would pick. By the way, Golden Grove.
Could be wrong, but let's see.
No. Don't have confidence, brother. Have confidence. Stick to your have conviction. Don't. So by the way, the RCS capital growth for this one is 96. For this one is 98. Okay. Let's see. This one has worse industry diversification than Shadow. This one has 78. This one has 70. Not dramatic, but there's a bit of a difference there. This one has an infrastructure spend of $1,600. Shit. This one has of $295. So Golden Grove wins there. So this is what you would do in a detailed comparison. You would assess both suburbs across all of the metrics, and you assign weightings to metrics to come to a conclusion. This one has spent less in the negative growth zone, so it has a better GRC. Arshad, let me see Arshad of this one. 7. This one is 7 as well. This one has a better renter to owner ratio than this one, although it's still low at 18%. That's pretty good. Let's look at affordability. Affordability is very close. It's similar. Now, trend for shadow is better than for Golden Grove for supply. Actually, it's pretty much the same. And now we have trend metrics. So there's a numerical representation of trend. Overall, both are reducing. Hold periods are sitting in 11, the other one 12, fairly close. Now, this one has a worse trend in days on market. Let's look at it. See, this one has a nosediving trend, both recent, although there are 2 pumps here, but overall, the recent trend has been reducing and overall. So the slope of the curve is going down and the 3-month rolling average is sitting at 22. This one has a flat days on market trend overall. The recent, if we count it, has been increasing and it's sitting at 31 days rolling average. So if we're going to discern which one is going to grow more in the short term, it will be Shadow Park because it has a reducing supply and a better demand trend. Vacancy rate is pretty much the same for the overall trend. This one has a recent trend that's potentially a little bit better. So overall, they're fairly close, man, I would say. I think long-term, Golden Grove, short-term, Shadow Park.
Because of that higher infrastructure spend, yeah?
Higher infrastructure spend. It has a better GRC curve shape, has spent less in the negative growth zone. The URSAT confirms it. Let's look at the ROI projection, 0 to 14 for this one. -1 to 17 for this one. They're actually fairly close, man. They're fairly close. See what I mean by a GRC? See how this one has been in the negative growth zone a bit more, which means that its fundamentals are potentially more wiggly than Golden Grove. See, Golden Grove is only tippy-toed into it, you know, into the negative growth zone once.
Matt, the socioeconomic IRSAD, how often is that like recalculated to or like updated as
every 4 years? It's a census metric.
It's based on the ABS, right?
Yeah.
So like when the next info or like when the next census happens, we will really know which areas have been like have changed and been gentrified quite a lot.
Yeah, we have gentrification happens rarely, and when it does, it happens at opposite sides of the spectrum, i.e. at the lower end, at the higher end, mostly. And how I know this information, I'll tell you. Also when it happens, it takes decades. It doesn't take years. So that happens slowly and gradually. For substantial gentrification to happen in an area, it means that the entire GDP of an area or the purchasing power of its residents needs to be completely replaced and substituted. So it takes a long time. Now, we have an Excel file on in our store which shows the changes in URSAD across time since it's been recorded, and you can actually see which areas have changed, which haven't. And this is how I know how gentrification or how the socioeconomic replacement of an area happen, if it does even happen.
Yeah, it doesn't happen like over 4 years.
It doesn't. It's not something that just, you know, and usually people, what I see when they're pushed into a corner about a particular suburb, they usually scream out gentrification. I go, hold on. You know, they're pushed into a corner because they have no answers for me. And then okay, but what if the area gentrifies? And this is the usual, a route out or a way out. It's important to know that, again, gentrification happens mostly at the opposite sides of the spectrum. It happens slowly and rarely.
What does that mean?
As in at 1 and 2 and at 8 and 9.
Okay.
So that's where the changes happen mostly from the data set that was published by ABS and that we've compiled into an Excel report. I think it's for free. It is for free. Anyone can go on our website and download it, and you can actually see changes across time, and you can actually, it's an informative document. I suggest everyone actually takes a look.
Yeah.
So we can stop talking about gentrification.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Because for me, it's something that I talk about quite often, so I think it would be quite enlightening.
It's a good one to actually have a look at and actually see what has changed. It's a bit mind-numbing because it's an Excel spreadsheet, at least for me. but it's very informative.
Okay, beautiful. Any final thoughts you wanted to add on South Australia? Any questions from the crowd, or I think we might tie it off early today. I mean, it's pretty much 8:45, so we're about due for it, but we'll tie it off with any final questions. I think that last comparison we did between Golden Grove and Shadow Park was really interesting because they're two suburbs that are rough, similar price, rough, like all the metrics were pretty close to each other. So it was good to go through that.
When you have something like that, when an eye test doesn't suffice,
Yeah.
as I said, it's always good to put it in a spreadsheet and complete a detailed comparison, because then you sort of don't worry about, you just essentially extracting the information into Excel, you're assigning weightings, and you don't have any emotion tied to it.
Yeah.
The detailed comparison removes the emotion, and it also removes the bias, and it's especially useful when you have something very close.
Yeah. Nice. Someone has asked thoughts on Bedford Park. Uh,
Bedford Park,
yeah.
how do you spell it?
Bedford.
Bedford.
There you go, right at the
I'm
top.
so bad with these names and spelling. I mean, English is my second language, but I think it's thoughts right away. I'm medium confidence, so low volume of
Very
sales.
small. It's a very
R-
small suburb. It's a
yeah,
very
look at the risk.
just
So
mentioned there's some Flinders University campuses there as well, from what I remember.
I don't personally like what I'm seeing. I mean, high infrastructure spending. I don't know what they're building, but the
Sorry,
industry.
the infrastructure spending that's the broader council area, right? It's not just the
No,
individuals.
it's this suburb only,
Oh, it's just the suburb. That's the infrastructure spend
and
per.
this is per capita per person.
It's probably related to university because this suburb is where Flinders University is. So probably most of that infrastructure spend is
Yeah,
related.
so it's very central. It's the industry is lacking diversification within this town. Also, data is of median confidence, and you can see that there were some years where there was, um, you know, very sporadic and no record of sales.
It's a tiny suburb. It's a very small suburb. I think this suburb, from what I know
Yeah,
about it,
see how there was no recording of sales.
yeah,
So when you have median confidence data and like poor data set like this, it's see high renter to owner ratio, very concerning. This is a very
yeah.
you
I
don't
think
want to see that because when macroeconomic conditions change and then investors start disposing of property and they can't hold it anymore, you get an influx of property which completely debilitate price growth, very unaffordable, sitting at
yeah,
50 years to own and the price. See, we had an example. We had it. So what do we have? Shadow Grove is sitting at 40 years to own, and it's 187K price point. This one is 162, very close, and yet it's sitting at 50 years to own.
yeah.
While
I
it
think
has a high renter to owner, I see risk marks everywhere.
yeah,
Now, looking at its supply and demand, supply is increasing, demand is reducing. Supply is reducing, demand is increasing, i.e., the overall trend is taking a nosedive. Yes, the recent trend is increasing, but the 3 month rolling average is still sitting at 34 days. My concern is how much should I trust this data because it's median confidence? That's one concern. But let's assume median confidence is still okay. You can make a decision upon it. So in the short term, this area could potentially return something, but long term, I would stay away from it. And again, whether an area is a good investment location or not, as we discussed many times, depends on its comparison to the other areas in the same price point. So if I had to choose between this one, Shadow Grove, and Shadow Park and Golden Grove, I would definitely choose the latter two than this one.
yeah. I think from what I know about the suburb, I personally haven't purchased here. I know it's quite given its like proximity to the university, similar to kind of like Clayton in Melbourne. It's a popular suburb for rooming house conversions. People buy it. So it's like you're not buying there for the capital growth. You buy, like a 4x1 and you convert it into a 6 bedroom, 4 bathroom, and then it's a 9% yield property, right? Or
Yeah, look at
9%
the
net
look at the
yield.
yield, how low it actually is, and how much it's dropped.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like probably just like fundamental for like a base investment.
Yeah.
Definitely, the data is saying no. But I do know some people that look at this area for rooming house conversions. But that's uh something to look at, as because I don't think something like rooming houses would be pointed to in the data because they're like such a unique, small, like there's so few of those.
Well, like there's not enough volume to record price points for two-bedroom homes, for example.
Exactly. And
You
rooming
know,
houses are like 6 bedroom homes.
so yeah, it all comes down to volume, and yeah, those peculiar alterations is not recorded.
It's not recorded in the data, right? So it's
It's not
something
recorded because we buy data of big data houses. You know what I mean? And they
exactly.
wouldn't have the data. The core logic, the real estate is the domains.
Yeah. It's in one of the streets and on the metrics you went through. Okay, sweet. I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for making the time, Matt. Thanks everyone for jumping in. Uh, yeah, keep in touch. If you have any questions, let us know. If you haven't already signed up to HTAG, you can sign up pretty easily. The sign up code is SA underscore data underscore insights. Pretty simple, pretty easy. If you're having any issues with that code, let us know. And not next week, 2 weeks from now, I think it's the 7th of November. We have 7th or 6th or something like that of November. We have our last one, which will be New South Wales. That'll be a really interesting one to look at what affordable markets are there and where can people look at. I know there's quite a few good spots that people are starting to pick up in New South Wales. So we'll tie up the series there. But thanks again, everyone, for jumping in. And again, if you want to watch the recordings for the other ones, I'm sharing the link in the chat here. All the recordings are there. Please give us a subscribe as well. And Matt, you can drop your YouTube page for those who haven't already followed Matt.
I don't have a YouTube page, but yeah, I mean, just join our Facebook group if you wish. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Beautiful data-driven property insights. Yeah.
Yeah. Should I post a link there?
Yeah, just drop the link in there. I think for the next one, I'll add it onto the slides as well.
Just give me a second. Just give me a second. Share, copy link. Where are we? Boom. Here.
I'm pretty sure most of the people here are already part of the group, but if you're not, make sure to jump on. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Matt. Again, good fun having a chat.
All right.
Let's catch up soon. Take it easy,
All
brother.
right. Thank you all. Cheers.
Yeah,
Take care,
bye.
legend. Speak soon.